Hey all, Pixel here in Probable Garage. We're back on the Cyberpunk Cube, and today we are working on custom rear tail lights. So, just like in the front, this plastic bumper is coming off and something custom is being built. But unlike in the front, before I build the whole bumper assembly, I need to modify these tail lights because I'm making some big changes. The biggest one is that the license plate is getting moved up here, so the bumper's got to be out of the way. But I can't build another structure until I know exactly where the taillight's going to be. And we're going to be leaning heavily into the asymmetry of the cube in the taillight design. I'm going to rip the bumper and the lights out and see what we got to work with. And then I'll show you the lights I got and my plan going forward. Pull the taillights out, and I think I may have mentioned this in the prior videos, but I'm going to mention it again, that one thing Nissan did that I really like here is, I can't find the way it happens. There it is. The taillights have a plug. I can't do it one-handed. But they have a plug that plugs into the battery harness. Then the taillight has its own harness. This is really awesome for what I'm doing because it means I can scavenge this tail light wiring and make all my modifications and add my taillights to that without cutting up the car's wiring harness. So that's awesome. Alrighty, got everything stripped, except these, will do those later. So, yeah, so the big thing, I was looking at this and going, bumper bars doesn't stick out the same. Why would Nissan have a bumper bar that's not symmetrical? And then I realized when you come over here, it's got a pretty good crunch down here. And if you look very carefully in this area, you can see there's a wrinkle there, there's another one there. So this has all been crunched in at least an inch, inch and a half, pushed inwards. So before I start building out the bumper, that's going to be a major thing I need to deal with. Fortunately today we're not building the bumper, so I don't have to worry about that right this moment. With regards to lights, so this thing goes back in here, some there, and that's the filler for the little section of the door. It's probably going to go back in, though I may use the gap here to do something interesting with cabling, maybe. We'll burn that bridge when we get to it. But other than that, the nice thing is I've got a lot of mount points, because I don't want to weld directly to the structure. I want this all to be removable. Same as like the front thing I built. So I've got a mount point there, I've got a mount point here, I got one here, one here, one here. So I've got several threaded points to bolt to. I also have multiple plug holes that if I needed to, I could put a bolt in from the back. I've got a bracket here I probably won't need and will probably have to remove, but we're not going to make that call right yet. These are the pressure vents. All modern cars have these because the doors seal so well. They need a way for, as the HVAC is pulling in air, or you've got a window down, there has to be a way for that air to get out of the vehicle. So that's what these are. So I need to leave these. Depending how visible they are, I may make a little metal cover that's open at the bottom so that they're not as obvious, but I'm not worried about them for right now. Here's my wiring harness. This is one taillight. It's the other taillight. This goes to a sub harness that was for the license plate lights and the little marker lights out on the side. I'm still probably going to use that sub harness for taillight wiring, but I think the side markers, I'm not going to use that because I'm planning to integrate a turn signal into them. These are just light up side markers. I want a blinker as well. And I have some different ones I'm going to use, so they're probably just going to get tied into this instead for simplicity, instead of part of that harness and part of this harness. So there we are on that. When I close this, this is something I did not think about because it wasn't obvious. This is straight across. There's a little dip right here, but 99.9% of this is straight across, and like with a half a second with a grinder, I can make this straight across. So I was originally going to build into the factory sort of shape. Now I'm realizing I don't have to. I can put my lights further out if I want to. I can move my lights into this space. So that's very interesting. That was not something I had accounted for at all. Speaking of lights, let me go grab them. And so here are my taillights. Said I was going to lean into the asymmetry, so I got a set of these. They're intended to be this way. These are truck taillights. But I'm going to mount them as a pair that way. And these have, I'm going to do this with a, here's a cool thing. A lot of LED stuff for 12 volt will run off of 9 volt. It doesn't actually need 12 volts, so a 9 volt battery is a great way to test stuff. So this has a turn signal that does the cool chasey thing. It has a brake light. It has a running light, and it has a reverse light built in. So these are all-in-one lights. I liked this funky, weird shape. It's not something you usually see, and the double chase I think is going to look cool. So that's going to be one side. I don't know if it's going to be this side, but I had to put them on one side or the other. And then these are going to be the other ones. These are going to be stacked in some sort of verticality. And these pretty much do the same things. They don't have a reverse light built into them. So this has a brake light, a running light, and a chase turn signal. So this is going to be one side, this is going to be the other side. These are a 4-inch taillight. These are also about a 4-inch. I thought 4 inches was going to be here, not here. I don't know why, because I should know better. But so they've got this flange, which I'm probably not going to use, which is going to mean I'm going to have to get a little bit inventive about mounting them. One possibility is going to be, because this is just held in by little press tabs, prying those out and seeing if I can put this in the flange the other way around and then mount the flange to the back. If that doesn't work, I'll figure out some other way of mounting this. These are nice and simple. They've got 2 little studs on the back. So my original plan had been one light there, a gap, and then these 2 lights in some sort of vertical arrangement over here. And then because like there's going to be a gap from there to the center, but the gap from the center to here is going to be bigger, I was then going to put the license plate over here. So that's still essentially the plan for the license plate, is on the side with these 2 little lights. But now that I have the ability to put a completely different rear design here, where I can just treat this as a vertical, as a complete horizontal, and go out as far as the body goes. When I talk about grill here, my plan right now is to use this steel mesh. It's a very fine punched mesh, because I think that'll look really good. Because it's not going to try and look like it's a grill for airflow, but it is going to look like a design element. You know, that's going to look like a factory. Once that's painted everything, that'll look like something that was factory, not something added on later in the way that something made out of just regular expanded steel or whatever will. Now over on this side, I can cut 2 holes in the mesh, and those will fit in, and then either just run a screw into one of the holes in the mesh, or if I have to, make that hole a little bit bigger and put a nut on the back for the screw to go through, and I can even weld that nut to the back of this mesh to make it easy to install and uninstall from the front. I need to make some sort of framework for this to sit in. Once I have the piece designed, like the actual taillight panel itself, I can then figure out from there how to mount it to stuff. I'm not too worried about that. This mesh, I may put a whole panel behind it the entire way just to help hide all this stuff. I may paint all this stuff black to hide it, but I can weld to the back of this in ways that won't be super visible, because even if it fills like one of these holes, I can drill the hole back to make it less noticeable. Or the framework that I put around the mesh, I can tie everything into that. It's not going to need to be super strong because it's not going to be super load bearing. The most weight it's going to have to handle is if somebody lays something here, loading it into the back, or somebody sits here, but that's not going to be a difficult thing for steel to handle because I'm not going to use sheet metal. I'm going to use actual bits of steel, so that shouldn't be an issue at all. I have a bunch of stuff. I don't know if I have a bunch of super useful, like for structure I got tons. I've got this piece of flat bar, which will be some but not enough. I have a bunch of the stainless, but that's theoretically for the Oldsmobile, so I'm not eager to use it, though I do know where I can get more of it at a good price, so it's not a absolute no. Square stock, round stock. What? I think some piece of flat something. Not necessarily the stainless, but maybe something that size. I thought I had some. Oh, I must have used it for something because I have this bit of it. But like something like this, if I bend this to the shape I want, I can then either cut the steel to fit in it, or I can literally lay this on the steel perforation and weld it to it and then cut out whatever's extra. So, you know, that'd recess this mesh a little bit, which would actually look pretty cool. That would, yeah. If I can get more along these lines, it doesn't have to be exactly this, but if I can get something more along these lines, I can build my whole outer thing, get the shape I want, potentially even tie that shape into other stuff, and then just cut some sheet and weld this to the back of it, and that'll get me that part of it. Now, I'm gonna... Ironically, I'm surrounded by license plates. Oh, you know what? I was gonna say I'm surrounded by license plates, but I can't use them. But they're attached to the wall. I can easily move one from the wall. So we're going to take this plate, which is one of many given to me by friends. Oops, one more screw. And use it for some test fitting. There we go. So, height. That takes up most of that space. So by the time I've got a little bit of trim at the top made out of that flat stock, the plate basically takes up that whole space. So what makes the most sense then will be to have an area specifically dedicated to the plate, possibly recessed. Yeah, if I make an area for the plate and I make it so that it can be recessed in a bit, but it has its own frame, then I can just attach the rest of it to that and it'll look completely like it's supposed to be there, and that'll be great. I could even put the plate like at the end, but I don't think I like that. I think I want the plate maybe like, you know, so that this body line doesn't follow perfectly, but like, you know, you can kind of take this body line and then that'll be the edge of the plate area. Something like that. Because I don't want to put the plate here, that's boring. But the plate will have to be kind of its own piece. And if I make it out of something thicker or otherwise figure out a good way to recess it back, that gives me room to put plate lights, which is important and necessary. So yeah, even if I make it out of that same thickness, I can maybe do two hoops like that the plate actually sits on in the back. More mesh, something to sort of hide the jank around it. But do I want round ends? Yeah. The original one had round ends, so that'd be carrying that motif, but it'd just be carrying it a little bit further physically outboard. Dead square corners would look dumb because it would look hacked together. But if I can bend a corner into it, like around an edge or something, that'll give me, just a little bit of curve. Like if I bent it around the edge of this or something, not this piece, but, something like this that's got that little bit of a radius. That'll give me a little bit of a radius, a little bit of a radius. And then on this side, same thing. I can do the same thing for the plate section. So that motif will carry around. It's a cube, so having that squared off actually makes a little bit more sense than having it rounded. The round taillights will fit a slight bit odd into there, but that's not bad. Square plus round is not awful. That's a common enough thing in design that it's not going to be jarring. And if I bring this out to here, so I need to maintain the mounts for stock lights, because if I get too much hassle from the police or state inspection and they won't accept my funky taillights, I need the ability to mount stock lights back into it. So if I completely mount it make it so that those aren't usable, I can potentially really screw myself over. But if I make it mount to the stock mount light things, then I'll be fine. Because if this becomes something that causes so much problem and so much hassle I can't legally drive the vehicle without it being a huge deal, that's not viable, because this is going to be a car. This is not a show car. This is a daily driver. In so much as working from home, you need a daily driver. But I can also modify the body, because I don't need the body to match those taillights, because even if they're janked back in there, I'm going to be doing something else to then make them look interesting and different that doesn't cause as much hassle. So it doesn't matter if I cut the body up a little bit in the process. So I think I need to buy more steel, because I thought I had a bunch more of that small stock, but I think I was thinking of that stainless stuff I'm not eager to use. So I need to go buy more steel. Sadly, I have to pay more at Home Depot or whatever, because they're not going to have it. Because Metal Supermarket is not open, and I don't want to wait until Monday to do that. So yeah, I think the next step is buy some steel so I can start making stuff. Cardboard templating or something would probably be really smart at this stage. I'm not going to do that, because I prefer to work in metal. This is small enough scale that I don't worry I'm not going to ruin anything super expensive, and it's easier for me to just make it and iterate on it rather than a bunch of cardboard templates, because again, this is small enough scale that I can get away with that. Okay, I'll catch up with you once I have some more materials. All right, plans change again. I decided I'm going to use this stainless because it occurred to me that I can polish that, so I can get a chrome edge, where if I use regular steel, I can paint it, and I can try and paint it to look like chrome, but it'll never be chrome, whereas stainless can get polished to a chrome finish. So it gives me more options. I'm going to be welding it with regular MIG wire, which means I'm going to have to be very careful about where and how I weld it, but still. So yeah, we're going to do that. I'm going to still take a little bit of a break, but I'm going to come back out here when I've got another chance and start working on that. All right, and we're back. I've actually been fiddling with something before I remember to turn the camera on. So I was talking about how the lights have this ring that I wasn't expecting, and then I was talking about maybe using it. And then I fitted it up and realized it takes up pretty much all of this space. Once I've got a top and a bottom piece, it's going to be that whole space, and it's going to be about the same size as the license plate. It's nearly the height of the license plate. So the license plate space would still be a little bit bigger because it needs a framework around it, but it wouldn't be as much of a dramatic difference as I want. So I went and I took the other one apart. There's 3 little tabs that I bent out, and this is what you're left with. It doesn't really have any mounts whatsoever. We'll get to the little piece of cardboard in a second. It doesn't really have any mounting things whatsoever. It's designed to fit into this, or I think some of the trucks use a rubber gasket that fits into the hole, and then this is pushed into it, and that it's friction fit. The rubber gasket's obviously not going to work for me. This in this direction is not going to work for me, but I tried it the other way around, and it works in the sense that it looks right. You know, it'll end up with a little chrome ring around it, which is 100% down with that. But it sort of flops around in there a little bit and doesn't really fit well. So that's what this little piece of cardboard was. I was just doing a test. And when I put that in there, I can't do it one-handed, but when I put that in there, it holds it in a way that makes it clear that if there's something to fill that gap, it'll be in there, you know, as long as it's all the way around, it'll be centered in there properly. It'll look fine. And then I just have to do something to hold it in. So I had some thick craft foam, which was way too thick. I don't have any regular craft foam conveniently at hand, but that's probably what I'm going to be using, craft foam or something. Cut a piece, fit it in there, slide this in so that it's this way, so that it's going to protrude through the mesh like that. And then that'll leave me some mount holes in the back. And then what I can probably do is, like, between 2 or maybe even all 3 of the mount holes, I can run some kind of strap or something and figure out a way to secure it so that this can't rotate. Like, once it's in there, holding it in there shouldn't be complicated because I have the whole back of it to work with. And worst case scenario, it'll go in with a little bit of, like, silicone or RTV or something to hold it in place against that foam. So that's how I'm going to handle that, which means now I can fit just using this. I don't need to have the light present, which is good because it reduces my chance of getting welding splatter or something on the light. So that's going to be coming from this direction. There's these little tabs, which is not perfect, but I think with a little bit of care, I can hammer these a little bit straighter and make them less obvious. And then with a little bit of a polish to the outside, but, you know, if I mask off right at the edge of where that flange is and paint everything else flat black, these will be very hard to notice at that point, and I think that's going to be a perfectly acceptable solution. And that shrinks the size of this to not, instead of being most of the opening, it's going to be significantly less. And compared to the plate height, you know, we've got at least 1 inch now, so I think that'll work perfectly for that. And also, I was talking with my partner and getting their sort of feedback, just because it's always good to have another set of eyes when you're about to commit to something like this. And I bent this up. This is not the right size anymore. This is actually a little bit too big now. But it was just completely eyeballing it because we needed a rough shape. You know, just because this is basically what the ends are going to be shaped like. And I really like that look. I like that cube, but soft corner kind of thing there. This also helped me sort of visualize this area some more. I think I'm going to have to build the main one first, secure that to the body, at least, you know, get it all tacked together so that I physically have it in place, and then work from there to build this piece as a separate thing, because I think I'm going to need to know my shapes here first before I can start working on my shapes here. We had some thought of, instead of mounting the 4-inch ones here horizontally, maybe cocking them slightly to fit, you know, because this is a slant and this is a slant, having them at a slant might make them work better in that space. I can't mount them vertically, even though they would probably fit here really well, because they've got that chase turn signal, and that would look really weird going up. But even at an angle, that'll look fine. So this, I think I might on this side not come out as far. I think I might intentionally, or possibly on both sides, I might not intentionally come out as far as I originally talking. Maybe I'll come out past the original, which only came out to about here, but I may not come all the way out to here. I suppose I have to commit to that sometime soon, though, to cut metal. But I think I'll grab one of these pieces of stainless. Oh, the other thing I realized is this is a lot more of an arc than I had really realized. I'd been kind of thinking of it as mostly flat with a slight curve, and no, it's not. We laid one of those across, and it ended up somewhere in here when it's held against the corners. So that's a significant thing I need to account for. Originally, I was like, oh, instead of doing it this way, I'll do it this way, because then I can put a curve in it, and that'll be easy. And then I realized, yeah, but you can't bend your ends that way. So I still have to go this way, but I'm going to have to figure out a way to put at least a little bit of a curve in it. Probably won't be too difficult. It'll probably be something that I can... Maybe I can use the sheet metal shrinker. Probably not. I'll probably crack the die trying to do that. But I'm sure there's going to be some way that I can get a little... Because I don't need the perfect matching arc. I just need to have it bow out at least somewhat in the center so that it's not quite so glaringly different end to end. And I can also cheat that a little bit because when I when I do the license plate here, I can attach this to the outside edge of it, so it's actually going to be a, I'll have the license plate correctly at this edge, and then this piece, instead of being in here, will be attached to the outside edge of it, and can be more of a angle that way, so that I just have to bow a little bit instead of having to bow the entire thing. And the same thing on this side, is I can cheat it and have it come off the front edge and go back. So I'm not super worried about that part right now. It's just a piece I need to keep in my head as I'm designing along. So I think what I need to do is measure this, decide exactly how wide I want to make things, because I don't want this to be touching the outside, but I don't need it to be hugely larger. And then that'll give me my overall height. I think I'll cut a piece of wood or something that height so that I can get this bent to correctly fit around it, and straight, bring that shape down the whole length of this, get my outer pieces for the license plate and the two ends bent up, and then figure out what we're doing next from there. So I'll see you on time lapse. All right, well, it is built. Had to make a couple compromises. The biggest one being there wasn't a piece long enough to be this entire hoop. So the way that made that make the most sense was to bring this out where it needed to be, bring it around, and then it's welded to another piece that comes around and forms this one. This lost me a rounded corner here and a rounded corner here, but it gained me not having a weird thing in here. This was easier. End it there. The other problem with having to build this all at once like that is I still have to deal with getting the curve into stuff. And I'm realizing, now that it's in place, that's a hell of a gap. So this all may get sucked in a little bit relative to the door, but I'm not sure about that. I don't know. Still, frankly, I'm still second guessing myself. And again, we talk about how much, that's all straight across. And then when I close the door, sticking out here, it is to the second knuckle of my finger, deep there, and then it's, basically at the edge there. So I need to get some curve into that to make it work, and getting some curve into that will also help the ends not stick out quite so much, because they'll be, I'll leave maybe a ½ inch off the end there. But I think it'll work. I think we can make this work the way we want. Grab the light here, and yeah, pieces of wood are complicating this, but yeah, that'll totally work in there. That'll totally be a functional light, and then have another one over here, have that fall down, and then have the whole thing tip back. All right. So I guess the next step is to put that curve into it. I'm not sure the best route for that. So, by the way, I don't know how much... If you weld stainless with regular MIG wire, your weld is going to rust because it's regular steel. It can also affect the chemical composition. The heat affects the chemical composition of the stainless and can cause the stainless in that area to lose its anti-corrosion properties. So my sort of compromise for that is I welded the back of each of the welds. I didn't weld all the way to the front. This makes them weaker, but it increases the chance that that front face will still polish up and stay polished up, and I can hide the rest of it with a little bit of black paint. Most of these aren't going to be a problem. The only place it's really going to be an issue is trying to bend relative to that and trying to bend relative to that to get that curve in. This is going to stay straight, I think. I don't think I'm going to try and put a curve into that unless I find a really effective method. The way I'd love to try and do this is with a pipe roller, but I would have had to have done that before I assembled it. And probably would have had to either modify or had a custom die to fit a groove into it. But, So the jaws of that will probably work as far as fit on it. How do I do this? How do I do this? If I can get it into that side, I'll try it there. Oh, I'll be right back. All right, I really should have been filming that because it was ridiculous. But I tried one thing and it didn't work, and then I just ended up jamming it in different places and yanking on it and seeing what happened. Amusingly, what ended up being most effective is jamming it down in here between the body and the bumper and pulling on it, because anything else and I could shift the table or the vise or whatever. This, there was no moving, ton of plus of vehicle. So yeah, just went literally in there wherever, yanked on it. I discovered one of my welds isn't strong enough, but I'm now in the amusing position of having actually bent it a little too far in some places. So the curve is, like if I get the curve right over there, it ends up right, but now it's not quite in the right place. And I need to put a little bit more bend into this section right here, which turned out to be difficult once the weld broke. But now that it has some curve in it, I can tweak that curve with how I install the mounts. I don't have to get it perfect, because one, it doesn't have to be perfect. This car is not a perfect project. But also two, once it has some curve, I can pull it in a little bit more here, or push it out a little bit more there as I mount it. And that will take care of a lot of that and get that much closer to the curve that I want and need. So I need to bend this section a little more here. This is a little too flat. Clean that up and re-weld it. And then start on fabricating. Realistically, I'm realizing I need to put the mesh on now, because the the mounts that I'm building, I can't weld them onto this without interfering with where the mesh is supposed to sit. So the mesh is going to be the next step. That's going to get welded on from the back and then very carefully tacked and then trimmed along the edge of it. And then I can start in on mounts. I'm not worrying about wiring at all right now. I'm not worrying about anything else. I'm not even going to drill the holes for the lights until I have it installed. All right, and this is essentially built. Got that piece in, I got the major piece in. It was longer than the piece I had, so I haven't filled that in yet because once I figure out where this is going on here, wherever the smallest point is, I'm going to cut this back and weld in another piece that butts up to that because it'll be basically invisible. There'll be so little of it on either side of this, possibly even none visible, that nobody will ever be able to see that there's a seam there, rather than put a seam there and then have maybe some of it visible. But I'm really happy with how this came out. This looks so good. This is the flange at the end of the sheet that I used. You know, it was on there, and then I decided I'm going to leave it on there for now. If I end up not needing it for anything, I can cut it off later, but it might be useful for attaching something. So, and it looks professional enough that it doesn't need to come out. And then when I was doing this, I actually realized something that made things a little bit easier, which is I welded this side so that it was perfectly aligned with a row of dots. And then that allowed me to then use the rows of dots going this way to align this. So this top piece is aligned, centered as best I could in this row of dots, which meant I was pushing it back and forth to get it straight on. Same thing at the bottom, same thing over here. This was all skew. Like this edge was up by at least like 1 to 2 rows of dots, so I had to push all that down. But the nice thing about that is that squared all this stuff up. It was unsquared in a way I didn't even realize, and this squared it right up. So, yeah. Really happy with that. Let's actually, yes, I can hold this. Oh, heck yeah. That looks good. It also looks so different. It's so much different than what was there. It's kind of unbelievable. So, this edge, yeah, like I was saying before, it's curved too much, but that's easier than the other problem because I can get that point and that point set the way I want them. And then at the center, I'll just make my brackets, whatever the quote-unquote right distance is, and then push this back, tack it to it. It's the same way I did it's kind of how I did the screen, is I pushed the screen in, because, you know, it would have wanted to lay on top of the curve. So I just kept pushing it down and welding it, and now the screen follows the curve. But all right, I'm calling it for right now, possibly for this evening. Hopefully not, because I'm kicking ass. But like I said, this has to come out of the garage, and I need to give that corner a yank to try and pull that metal out just even a little bit. Even if I can just get it like a quarter or a half an inch out of it, that should put it much closer to in line than it was. And that's my next step. Can't do anything else until I do that. So we're going to work on that. Give this a good yank. And most of what I did was wreck the bumper. But the bumper is wrecked, so that's okay. But, you know, so you can see it's pulling off of here. This is all bent outwards, but it also gave a bit of a yank to the panel. So this is actually too far out now, which is fine because it means it's improved this area some. I'm going to take that as my win, and I'm going to move on from there. I have made little metal tabs and attached them to all the mount holes. Unfortunately, this mount hole is actually over here, and I was putting the bolt in and the bolt snapped. And then I drilled it out and I put a easy out in, which is the biggest lie in tools. And unsurprisingly, the easy out snapped in there. And easy outs are made of some ridiculously hard metal that's impossible to drill out. So I just put a tech screw in next to it. Eventually I may go in and try and drill that out, but for now I'm not fighting forever with it, because it's probably a lost cause. And what I'll probably end up doing down the line is drilling straight through with a much bigger drill bit, and then just putting a bolt in from the other side, or welding another nut behind it and using a longer bolt or whatever. But today I don't care, and I'm not working on that. I'm working on installing this thing. So what I need to do is I'm going to shut the door and I'm going to start mounting this. I think I'm going to start, I may start in the middle. Yeah, I think I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to measure out my door, find the middle on my door, find the middle on this, mark them both so that I can keep them lined up, and then get it welded to those two center tabs, probably. Well, whatever. I'm going to weld it to the tabs as I can to get it mounted at the right distance. And for the moment, all I care about is getting it positioned properly. I can come back in and add more reinforcement, but I need to get it shaped and mounted in the right place, and everything else after that. Okay, this is not working the way I wanted. Fortunately, all these tabs are made out of too thin a metal, so I can't position anything because it just moves around. So I need to dig out some thicker steel that can't flex like that and remake the tabs out of that. And I have the whole thing, even though I measured and that should be the center line, the whole thing is shifted over that way more than it should be. So that's another issue, and I'm not sure why. But the more I look at the back of this side's okay, though this should be over here. Like, I don't mind this piece sticking out, but like, it all needs to be over. And I like this around here, but I don't like the big square hanging out in space over here. So I think what I'm going to do is shorten this so that it ends where the door ends, because the more I look at it, the more I hate this little sort of weird dead triangle space in here, and there's no good solution for that. So realistically, I need to cut off all these tabs and I need to start over again, and the most sensible way to start over is to probably cut this here and here, separate the two halves, get that half where I want it and how I want it, and then weld the shortened version of this half in, though I'm still going to have this. I'm wondering if I can just cut this somewhere and bring this all in, but I'm realizing no, there's tacks. Like, this is welded pretty far. Oh, okay. I could cut it somewhere like here and here and bring it in. I don't know. The basic idea is good, but it's not quite working. And this is a good point to stop and reevaluate instead of continuing down this path, if it's not the path I'm sure I want. Overall, I'm liking the concept. The details are not working for me. Alright, I decided screw it. I'm going to work on it for a little bit on my own. And I've gotten this far. It doesn't look like much, but there is a brace welded in here, and there is a new plate, heavier duty, attached to 2 bolts instead of just 1, and a brace welded to that. So this whole section, the top of it at least, is rock solid. I need to do something with the bottom, but because this is going to have the plate in it, I need to build the inner structure here, and then I can kind of go down to the bottom of that. Or I'm going to do I may just do 2 hoops, just where the plate bolts need to be. But either way, once I have that attached, I can then take off of this and go down, or take off of this and go down, something like that. But this side's now exactly where it needs to be, and good and solid. You saw I put this back in because I'm now second guessing putting those building that extra section to move those lights up in there because they will fit perfectly in this. But I'm not going to work on it now. I'm basically done. Mostly I'm dehydrated as hell. But now the next step is going to be build a brace, in this, build a brace around here, and then make another one of those plates and build a brace there, though I'm really thinking about shortening this because now that that's where I want it to be, this is way out there on this side, and I'm not sure I like it. I think if I'd made the end round, ironically, if I'd made the end round, I think I would have liked it. If I hadn't thrown my helmet on the ground, I'd like it. But now the squared off end, it bothers me. Like, I'm fine with the squared off end on this side, but I feel like this side should have been round because the lights are round. And I'm just second guessing all of my design choices here. All right, new day. Spent some time thinking about this last night, and I've decided on a course of action. So on this side, I'm not building the extra piece up here. I'm going to mount the lights in this because I realized I can't get a shape I like over here. And then over on this side, I'm going to make this shorter. And what I'm going to do is basically at the end of the door, I'm going to start a half circle and mount the lights in that. So it's going to stick out past the edge of the door, but it's only going to stick out by the amount of the circle. And I think that will work better. This sticks out too far, and I like the full asymmetry of that side's a squares, this side's round better the more I look at it. So that's my plan. I'm going to make the mount that goes here first, just so that this whole thing is way more stable, and then work on modifying that end there. And then once I've got all the top mounts in, I can start figuring out exact light placement, and I can start figuring out where the bottom mounts are. And then I have to figure out how I'm building the license plate box. So I'm going to put you back on time lapse, and I'm going to get to it. So sometimes being a hoarder of neat looking stuff is surprisingly helpful. This is the planetary gear assembly from a 1991 Ford Taurus transmission. Car I owned years ago that this needed to be replaced because somehow I managed to strip the teeth on the inside here enough that the input shaft was chattering in it. The guy at the transmission shop was genuinely impressed I'd managed to do that without grenading the transmission, but this cost me several $100s, so he let me have the old one. I've always been intending to turn it into a candy dish or something, but in the meantime it's been hanging out on the bench in the garage here. And it is going to be my form for bending the curved end. It is much bigger. I wanted something that was slightly larger than this. This is much bigger than that, but it is the closest thing I have found that's beefy enough to be able to be used for what I need to use it for. So I'm going to bend it around this, and then I'll have to bring that curve in some more to be actually useful in the place it needs to go. In the meantime, though, I have to figure out what the heck I did with... there it is. But I need to bend this around a form because I can't... There's no way to do this and get a nice clean bend. You'll always get a, especially on this that's been bent twice and straightened, because those spots will want to bend differently. So I needed a hard form. This is actually great because I'm going to be able to clamp one end in place and bend the other instead of trying to hold both ends. So I'm going to trim down that time lapse because there was a lot of me just staring at things, trying to figure out what exactly I was doing. But here we are. So I've got the curve in here and welded in. I've got the mesh welded to it. I had one little blowout right there, and then I hacked out the two openings roughly for the lights. Unfortunately, jittering this made this pop loose, so I had to re-weld it, but that's fine. These I'm going to have to go in with a grinder and basically very carefully open them up because I don't want to go too far with them. I don't want to open it too much. So I'd rather err on the side of caution and then sneak up on it. But that's just that trimming. And then once I get that in, I'm going to have to figure out the exact mechanism by which I'm securing this to the back, you know, back here. But burn that bridge when I get to it. I've got a lower brace down here welded in. So this is now rock solid. The end flexes a little bit, but I don't suspect that'll be an issue. And if it is, I will worry about that later. Over here, I've put in the license mount plate. It's welded on this side and welded on this side. This is a very rough strengthening rib because the plate's going to cover it. I didn't care about making it look pretty, but that just made this whole thing stiffer than it would have been if it was a single sheet. This weld is a brace that goes back to another bolt-on piece. So this is much stabler on this side, and I can't finish putting the nuts in because I realize I can't get behind here to weld them in. So what I'm going to do is, once this is off, I'm going to drill these holes out using a plate for reference, and then basically, you see right here what I have. I have a bolt with a nut, and then there's a nut on the other side, and I'm going to use that to tack weld the nut on the back side in place. Do that 4 times, and then a plate will be very easy to mount here. So, and then I think I might plate off the bottom of this just to keep the light from shining down through the whole bumper assembly. But I'm not 100% sure on that because getting the corners to look right might be a little bit difficult, and I don't want it to also become a little tray for water to sit in. So, major progress. I'm in the finishing details stage right now. All the major fab is done. So I've got this side's going to need its holes drilled for the lights. That side needs those ground out and then light mounts figured out. And I need to finish up the details on this, but oh god, this looks so good. This came out, oh, so good. So much better than I had. Oop, I'm stepping on sheet metal. Like, it looks nothing like what I was thinking, and everything like what I wanted. When I say nothing like what I was thinking, I was having so much trouble visualizing exactly what it was going to come out to, and this is just, oh, this is so good. I'm still trying to decide if I'm going to put the Cube emblem back on again, because that kind of amuses me to do that. I may or may not, but yeah, that looks so good. The inside here, eventually this is going to get a plate of either steel or aluminum covering it, just so that when I'm loading things in and out of it, I don't have to worry about dropping stuff in here. Plus it'll help hide the wiring and stuff. What I'll probably do is when I put the plate across here, all the wiring will get zip tied to the underside of it somehow. I have to figure out this mount because this is the one where the screw snapped off and then the extractor snapped off in it. And then I tried to use a screw and the screw fell out. I tried to put another screw in here and it isn't working. So that's a thing to deal with for future me. But overall, yeah, really glad of this. When I plate over this, I'm going to cut 2 little notches in this somewhere, and I have little flush mount LEDs coming in that are going to get mounted to the underside of that plate to be the license plate lights. They're so absolutely tiny that this bar being here is going to hide them completely from view. So that's going to be great. And I've figured out from that the 2 lights that are going in here, the little backup light that's going in with them is a 11 millimeter across. So I realized that there's enough space in here I can evenly space the 2 bar lights, and then those 2 little backup lights can either go between them or below, And I don't have to adjust the spacing to give room for them. There's going to be plenty of room for them there. So, yeah. I'm really glad of how this came out. This looks so good. This is exactly the type of thing I wanted. I wanted mismatched sides, but all looking somehow asymmetrical, but also cohesive. And that's exactly what I managed to nail here. Like, you've got the square there, you've got the rectangle there, you've got the long here. The fact that that and that are the same size and have the same back make them all look like something. But then this end is curved where that's all squared off. This is going to be a horizontal stack of 2 round, where that's going to be a vertical stack of 2. I mean, they're rounded edges, but 2 much squarer ones. Different sizes, different shapes, different designs. It's going to look really interesting. And it'll also mean all my stuff, license plate and lights and backup lights and everything, are all contained into this piece. The thing I have to decide is there were the 2 side markers that were on the bumper, and I just have to figure out whether I'm going to wrap a piece of metal around here and put the side marker there on both sides, or whether I'm going to integrate that side marker into the greater bumper assembly. Fortunately, I don't have to make that decision right away. Anyway, I think that's going to do me for right now. I might come back out later tonight, or I might be done for today, but I definitely need a break. But this is coming along real good. So the front bumper was really cool to build. I really loved building that, and it was really satisfying to put that together. But that was still just ripping off a plastic decorative panel and putting a decorative metal thing on. This is the first thing where I'm really changing the basic design of the vehicle, and I'm just so glad it's coming together the way I wanted it to come together. That it looks, you know, I don't feel like I've screwed the car up. I don't feel like this project's been a waste or anything along those lines. Like, this is really just, I'm nailing this. This is coming together so good. So, yeah, I'm gonna go inside, empty some tanks, fill some others, have some food probably, and decide if I'm coming back out here or not. But either way, I will see you when I'm back working at this.